hate to be the one to break it to you, but sex education of the past failed us. Because birds and bees, they don't fuck. Welcome to Birds and Bees Don't Fuck, a show where we learn exactly how bad our formative sex education, or lack thereof, really was. I'm your host, Arielle Zadok. My guest today is an award-winning sexuality educator, advocate, and author of the new book, The Purity Culture Recovery Guide, the shame-free sex ed you deserve. I'm just so excited about this book that I'm already fucking it up. But anyway, welcome to the show, Erica Smith. Yay!
Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you this afternoon.
I've been a fan of your work for so long because purity culture, I'm a Jew. Like, I grew up Jewish, conservative Jewish, so that's its own flavor of, conservatism. But purity culture seeps into everything we do, and it impacts all of us, regardless of how we grew up. So the fact that you have finally written your book and it is a guide for everyone to get rid of that shame is like, woo, you're doing the Lord's work.
I love when people call it the Lord's work. It's like my favorite thing.
I say that and then I'm like, I don't know how people feel about that sometimes, but I don't say it. Yeah.
We're reclaiming it.
100%. Have you seen people on TikTok? Well, I say people, I've seen literally one person do this, but have you heard of Gus saying Gus instead of God? Oh, okay. So I love this personally as someone who grew up in a religious context, especially as a conservative religious context. So Gus represents God, universe, and source. I also fold in ancestors, dead friends. I lost a friend a couple years ago and another one this year. So I'm like, y'all are in there too. And I find it to be, because I do usually say universe, but like sometimes that feels a little bit too woo-woo. I don't really connect to the word source. But I think it's really nice to have all of these different terms for the things that we can't understand if we believe that there is something bigger than ourselves, energy, whatever, but we don't want to put that religious connotation to it. So also the little mouse from Cinderella, Gus Gus, he's just so helpful.
Yes. I love that. Because when you said like friends that have passed, ancestors, like I feel very spiritually towards those things as well. Even like pets I've lost. So, like I will talk to them. I will think they visit me. And that feels much more real to me than like the Christian God of the Bible. So that's a really great shorthand.
And like, sometimes, in Hebrew we say Baruch Hashem, which is like God bless, or it means like, from my mouth to yours or whatever. And sometimes I'll just say it just to say it because I'm like, listen, when I'm trying to throw everything out there, I don't know who, what, where, when, why, how. I don't know what I believe because I can't prove anything. So you know what? Fuck it. We're going to throw everything at it. But it's not tied to rules and control and having to do specific things to earn the right to that love and that like that.
Yes. To be a good, to be worthy, to be good, because you're already worthy and good.
Like the divine is already in us. If we're going to go that route, it's like, that's already in every single human being. We exist. That's fucking magical. It's science, but it's also magic. And so,
Definitely.
I mean, I feel like with this conversation, it's just so easy to start from where did you grow up because it's so much of all of the work that you do. For other people, I get to it a little bit later, but like it's so much of the foundation of what you do now and how you've been literally healing the world. So tell me where you grew up.
Yeah, this surprises most people, but I didn't grow up in a religious family. I did not come from purity culture myself.
I am surprised. Okay, I love this. I love this.
Yeah. So I grew up in the mountains of rural Pennsylvania, very small town, seems far from, the modern world at times. And I had a family that I describe as casually Christian, like we celebrate all big Christian holidays, but in a super commercialized way. Like meaning for Easter, we didn't go to church. We didn't talk about or whatever they rising up. Like it's Easter as Good Friday as we're recording this.
And it's
so
Passover,
I feel like
so it's we're in it.
Yeah. It's a very holy time for some people. But yeah, I had a family that, like, I remember going to church a couple times in my life, and it would be like, "Do you wanna go to the Christmas Eve candlelight service?" Because it feels very,
It's
like,
pretty,
Christmassy
it's
and,
vibey.
um,
Yeah.
it's very festive. Yep, very much. And then I went to church a handful of times, like, with friends who were like, "Oh, you're spending the night. I go to church on Sunday," so I would go to church with them. But being raised to be afraid of God
Mm.
was not part of my experience. I never thought about religion. I never went to church. I never was afraid. I never had, like, rules dictated to me about how I should be. And I realize now that that feels like a privilege because, I realize that for the people that did grow up in, like, really, really rigid religious environments, they have a lot to overcome. But that was just not part of my experience. So I was like a teen in the 90s I was a feminist, I was a punk, I was a riot girl, and I was very interested in sexuality and feminism.
Yes, I
That's where I
love
came
that
from.
because for as many people as I have interviewed on this podcast, which is now I think 74 people, yeah, which is great.
Oh, amazing.
Purity culture comes up so much. And this is why you should never expect anything, expect the unexpected. And also why I love the fact that I'm asking these questions on this show, because I would have 1,000%
Mhm.
assumed that you grew up in purity culture. And this is the result of that because so
Yeah,
many people that I talk to, that was their upbringing, regardless of if they, like some of them do burlesque now, some of them are
definitely.
sexperts, some of them are comedians, because
Mhm.
people in every walk of life have grown up in that culture or in a high control group. A lot of people grew up in cults as well. It's
Yeah,
interesting when you talk
yeah.
about the fear of God, because I did grow up. So, being
Mhm.
conservative in Judaism, I had Shabbat dinner that I had to do every Friday night. My family kept kosher. There were things that we
Mhm.
had to do. I was not in that type of a control group where, like, I was, I think, 14 and I was like, I don't believe in this. I've never really connected to rules and all this
Okay.
stuff. I'm not going to temple anymore. It's disrespectful. I don't belong here.
Were you this is I don't know enough about Judaism, but was your, family and community, did they do, like, the
Um,
mikveh?
yes, in terms of like, and I'm not remembering mikvah completely, but that's 10 people, right? Like in order to pray?
Like, it's like
Oh, no,
when
no, no,
women
no,
bathe
no,
something to
no.
do with bathing off, like,
Oh, no.
after you menstruate,
No,
to be
that's
clean
more of
again?
like Orthodox
Okay,
and Hasidic, like that's like some next level shit.
okay.
That's where we get into the control.
Real
Yeah.
real Kai
Mine was
control
more
there.
of like
Okay.
my parents were
Mhm.
like, "Well, you have to be here for Shabbat dinner, so you can't go anywhere else. You have to keep kosher in the house." Like I would go out and eat
Okay.
cheeseburgers, but they didn't really
Mhm.
know. And, they give us, even now, they still give us shit. And it's like, who fucking cares? So I did not grow up. I can't compare that to a high control group, but I can compare it to like
Mhm. Mhm.
feeling left out because I couldn't go do the fun things on Friday nights, and that did exclude me from certain things and I had to be
Yeah.
certain ways. So definitely connect to some of those things, but the thing that sticks out for me when I think about
Mhm.
Christianity and purity culture, I mean there's so many things that stick out, but that fear of God, like that's not something that has ever existed
Oh,
within
good.
Judaism. So it is always something that whether you
Mhm.
believe in God or not or whatever, that I kind of looked at like,
Yeah.
what the fuck is happening here? Like, what do you mean you're afraid of God? Like,
Mhm.
God is the one that's supposed to be, like, if you believe it, like, the one that loves
That's how
you
I
no
felt.
matter who you are or what you do, and is this, like, all knowing, whatever, like, for us, it was still man in the sky, which I do not believe in at all. But it's
Mhm.
still like, you're a good person for the sake of being a good person. There's nothing to be afraid of. This is
Right.
how you behave in a group setting. You don't kill people. You don't lie, So
Mhm.
that fear is so interesting to
I
me.
used to not understand. Same. I used to not even understand what it meant to be God-fearing. I would hear people say like, "Oh, he's a God-fearing Christian." And I'm
Mhm.
like, "Why would you be afraid of God?" Because my idea of God was like yours, and I was like, "But isn't God like this, your grandma dies and goes to heaven and then God is there and he like takes care of her." Like that was my idea of God, not this dude that like will punish you if you jerk off
So wild.
privately in your bedroom. But
Yeah.
that is the God that like so many people were raised with, the god of like religious sexual shame. And it is so weird and ridiculous, when you really think about it, because if you believe this god created you and your body and all these wonderful things, like, did he really, really need you to not watch porn
Yeah,
or
and
whatever,
that is something that's really interesting about purity culture, and how it's so tied into sexuality, and specifically around sexual control and sexual shame, that from the outside,
Mhm.
because of course I grew up on the outside, it's wild. It's fascinating. I also went to a Hebrew day school, so I didn't, other than like, it's shoved down your
Mhm.
throats everywhere. So obviously, from the age of consciousness, I knew about Christmas and Christianity and all these things, because even if you're not there, like, it is
Of
completely
course.
shoved down our throats. What a Yeah,
Oh, yeah, they
exactly, and it's
make it
like,
your
I don't
business.
care, like, I don't know what this is, I don't care what this is. Um, so I've always had the, benefit of just watching this stuff and observing it, and this
Uh-huh.
obsession with sexuality and this obsession with fear is so
Yes.
fascinating, and always was so fascinating to me, as well as the whole Christmas, Easter thing. Like, it was always cosplaying. I'm like, yeah, I'll go. I joke like the Adopted You for Christmas program, because like it's fun. It has nothing to do with religion. It's just like pretty lights and family and togetherness, and like that's super cute.
Yes.
It-
Yes. That's how I
yeah,
experienced it, honestly, so I can see that there's a draw to
sure, but
that
it's not that
aspect of
religious
it.
draw, and it is. I just think it's so fascinating, the
Mhm.
focus and concentration on sex and sexuality in this one religion. Not to say that other religions don't
Yes.
do that; they absolutely do. But then if
Mhm.
you step back and start to look at more high control groups, the Venn diagram of that high control and sexuality, and whether or not they're using that as a manipulation tool and having sex with their members, or a restrictive tool and controlling the sex of members,
Mhm.
it's like a tent pole for high control groups.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. It's I'm glad you brought up the fact that there's the, like, there's the restrictive rules about people having sex, but other high control groups are like, there's so many cults where, of course, the, like, prophet, or it's usually a man, decides that he has to have sexual access to all of the young women. Or there's that group, the
Oh
orgasm
my
cult
god.
that
Oh,
was in,
it's
you know what I'm talking about?
oh, I know what you're
Orgasm. I just read a news article about them yesterday, because I think the woman who founded it
I think,
was
yeah,
was
I believe you're right on
prosecuted.
that. I don't remember
Um,
what it was, but it was like the
it's
meditate,
like
like the
the
orgasmic
spider web.
meditation. Girl.
Yep. Mhm. That was crazy. That was a crazy story, but you're right, like, using control in this group of people to dictate sexual behavior, and in their case, it was like forcing people to be
Yeah. And
sexual
you
with
see
each
that
other.
also. Have you seen, or are you familiar with twin flames?
Oh my gosh, I am so familiar. The purity culture rhetoric in the Twin Flames documentary
Ooh, let's dive into
was
that, because I wasn't even
crazy.
thinking about that. I was thinking more along the lines of how they would pair people up together, and how, regardless of their gender, they
Yeah.
would be like, well, you two are together. And by the way, you're a man, so you need to transition. And to the point where people were having surgeries, which is like, what?
Mhm.
Whoa. Absolutely.
Insanity. Um, one of the thing that I felt was particularly purity culture about it, wasn't so much, uh it wasn't like religious, but it was the sort of like
Mm.
new age spiritual, like, there's one person for you, and that is like having sex in a relationship with them is your highest calling. And it like elevated sex to this like really specific meaning. And while it's not religious, it's still these cult leaders dictating how you should experience sexuality. and how meaningful sexuality should be to you, and then using all that language of like the divine feminine, the divine masculine, as if like there always have to be super rigid genders. And like all of that was so, like, it echoes the like some of the main tenets of purity culture, where other people are deciding what sort of value you place on sexuality and how you should, save it for this one like very special person that you're meant to
Yeah.
be with
Which
forever.
is a concept in and of itself that is absolutely fascinating. I mean, I've been non-monogamous, I think, my whole life without knowing it. I remember I dated a guy in college, and right when we got together, it was like a month in, I broke up with him. Even though I absolutely loved him, I broke up with him because I was like, I'm 18 years old. What if I want to have sex with other people? What do we do then? And then I just really honestly didn't know that non-monogamy was even an option at that time. So
Mhm.
after a few weeks, we did get back together. I dated him for 2.5 years, loved the man. It was a great relationship. But now, from
Mhm.
where I sit, I
Mhm.
can't help but wonder how much more fulfilling my life would have been and how much more authentic my life would have been had I even known that that was an option. But growing up in society as a whole, we just don't, especially at that age, like you
Yeah,
just don't know that's
of
an
course.
option. Thank God the kids know now because the internet
Mhm.
exists. But, it
Kids too.
is part of that, like, one man, one woman. Even in Judaism, we see that too, because it's all about being fruitful and multiply. That being said, if you're gay, Jews are like, whatever, man.
Yeah,
Are you Jewish? Are you gonna stick to that?
I
Because
know.
that's really all we
That's
care
wonderful.
about. And no, we don't necessarily need anybody to convert. You got to really want that. Like, that's another really interesting thing to me
Mhm.
growing up Jewish, because we're like, no, 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 no. We're good. Yeah, it's
You
like the
don't
opposite.
evangelize. You let other
Yeah,
people
it
do
is the
whatever they're
exact
doing.
opposite, because if you're like, I want to be a Jew, we're like,
Mhm.
yeah, 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 okay, whatever. And then you got to come back and say, no, I want to be Jewish. And it's like, yeah, 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 okay, it's fine. You don't need to do that. And they're like, no, 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 I want to. Okay, great. Well, then you got to go through this whole rigorous thing. You got to go through a year. You got to work with a rabbi. You got to go through the stuff. You got to do a lot. You really, really got to want to do this.
Like Charlotte on
Yes,
Sex and the City. That's how I picture she had the rabbi shut the
exactly,
door in her
exactly.
face several times, and he
So,
was like, "We're
on
not
the opposite end of
interested."
that, when you look at Christian and Catholic, and especially evangelical, of course, but like the overarching is like, they are just trying to get you in. And so for me, that's always been like, what do you mean? You can't convince someone to be spiritual or believe in something. That's insane. I don't even say that word lightly, but that is like, I joke, the
Yeah,
most
yeah,
Jewish thing about me is that you can't tell me what to believe. Like, yeah.
which is awesome, you know?
Yeah,
I mean, that's such a
yeah. But
flex,
it is
honestly.
it's a fascinating thing
It's
when you're
just
just like trying to convince and manipulate people to come into this thing. And then once they do come into this thing, well, now we're going to put all of these controls on you, and we're going to make you believe things about your body and about
yeah,
your sexuality and about, life itself, that are maybe not even aligned with who you are and how
yeah.
you feel.
Yeah, and I mean, I've worked with so many people who they grew up believing that it was their fucking job to save other people's souls or they were failing. And so you have kids that are like 12 years old that are trying to
Yeah.
save their friends. And because they're like, I mean, it probably is unsurprising to so many people, but so many people who were raised with this idea of you have to save other souls and you have to recruit, they end up being super anxious people because they're always like, I'm not doing enough. I'm not doing enough. And if I don't recruit and save the souls of these like kids at my school or whatever,
Hmm.
then I'm going to go to hell. And so they just grow up with this like terror in the background at all times that they're just not doing enough and that they are not enough. And it is like so pathologizing and
It's
yeah,
heartbreaking to
truly
be
awful.
that young and to feel that much pressure. It is hard enough to be any
Mhm.
kid, especially now with social media and the internet and all of these outside influences coming in that we didn't have growing up. So to be that young and to just be trying to figure out the world and your body, and to be figuring out your body with such a lack of information, and figuring out all of these complex feelings
Yeah.
about yourself, about other people, and then to add on this massive, I mean, there's so many guilt trips in terms of your own body and your own natural feelings, but then to add on this layer of you
Mhm.
have to change your friends. And if you don't save them, they're going to this terrible place. I mean, it's heartbreaking when you really think of it. Like, we're talking about children
Yeah.
here. It's heartbreaking.
No, it's abusive. It's
Yeah.
deeply
And
abusive.
so, what do you, I want to circle back to like your own upbringing and your own sex education. So, you didn't grow up in purity culture. Love
Yeah.
that for you. What do you remember about your actual sex ed?
This is a great question. I had high school. Okay, the first thing I remember is I was in fourth grade in the late 80s, and we actually had a class about AIDS. And that was, I wish I could remember what we learned, but this was around like
Mm-hmm.
the scariest time for AIDS. So it was huge in the news.
Yeah,
Like
the
Ryan
artist.
White, I think, by
Oh,
then Ryan White, the child,
oh,
had acquired, he had AIDS
yeah.
because of a blood transfusion, and he got like this big story. So I definitely had an AIDS education class when I was in fourth grade. And then I don't think we had any sex education until then I was in high school. And it was, I went to a public school. It was a good public school, and our gym teacher taught us sex ed, and they separated the boys and the girls. This would have been around like 1996. And 95, 96. And I remember we learned about birth control, we learned about STIs. My gym teacher like photocopied something out of Cosmopolitan magazine and handed it to us. So it wasn't like the worst, but one of the things we did, which is so silly to me, is that we each had to carry an egg, a raw egg, around for a week or two and pretend it was our baby, so that we would learn that we didn't want
A
to be
raw
parents
egg?
as teenagers. And we all had raw eggs, and we like drew little faces on them and gave them names, and we had to take them everywhere with us. And the goal was like, you're carrying something delicate with you. You don't want to be a parent. You're not ready for parenthood. And I mean, there truly is no applicable, that experience doesn't teach you what you need to know
No.
about, pregnancy prevention and risk. It was just like a silly, cute exercise. But yeah, this was before school districts
Mhm.
had those
Yeah, we
fake
didn't have that either.
babies
I
that
think we did
cry.
sugar, but
Um,
there is something that's
no,
feeling familiar to me about an egg. So, I don't know.
some people do
Yeah.
flour.
Yeah,
They'll
maybe it
do
was
like a
flour or
sack of
something.
flour.
I do remember because
Um,
we had home ec, so I do remember we had to do something like that, but I don't. I got to start talking to people from that I
yeah.
grew up with to be like, "What happened to us? I don't remember."
Yeah. Well, I remember, we had the eggs, and I was super interested in the topic, and I would ask my gym teacher. I can remember asking her questions that she didn't know the answer to, and I don't blame her for not knowing the answer. And she was probably like, "Damn, like this girl really wants to
Or
know
damn,
some
this girl's
stuff."
making me really
But
uncomfortable.
by that yes. But by that time, I had gotten better sex education from I was the most I was the most responsible teenager in the world. I went on the birth control pill before I had sex with
Wow.
my high school boyfriend. So we planned it. We'd been like messing around for months, and we're like, okay, we're gonna have sex now, but I need to go to the family planning center first. And there was a free family planning center. And I remember I was 16 years old. I went there. They treated me wonderfully. And they gave me a birth control prescription and a whole bunch of condoms and even like
Wow.
spermicide pellets. Um, And I made sure that I like read all the directions and I was like, okay, I need to be on this pill for 7 days before we have sex. And it was like countdown, like I'm going to start it today. And then by 7 days we can have sex. And we used condoms and we used spermicide. I was like the most diligent fucking
Yeah.
sexual health nerd about it. Um, so yeah, I was like super, super prepared. And I just wanted to know everything because I wanted to have sex, but I was like, I'll be
Mm.
damned if I get pregnant. There was a massive high pregnancy rate in my high school. Like, I only graduated with like 105 people in my class, but at least like 8
Wow.
girls
That is
had
a
babies
lot.
and more guys like were
Wow.
fathers too. So I was just like, nope, not going to happen to me. I'm
Yeah.
getting out of
Yeah, I
this
guess
town.
small town. I mean, I grew up right
Yeah.
outside of New York City. We had 400 people in
Mhm.
my graduating class. One person got
Okay.
pregnant. That's it. So, and they're still together, by the way. They have 3 kids. They're
Yeah.
still together. So, like, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
And
I also wonder,
oh, for
about, like,
sure.
secretive abortions. I don't who knows how
Yes.
many people had secretive abortions, but I just knew that I wasn't gonna be one of them, and that to not be one of them, I needed to know as much as I could know, and this was before the
You had to
internet.
go to
It was,
Planned
like,
Parenthood, or at least I did.
mid-90s. The internet wasn't easy. Yeah, yeah, I went to that family planning clinic, and they gave me pamphlets, and I went to the library and read books
Yeah,
that's where
it's
I
all
got my
that
sex ed.
curiosity, which is like that is 1,000% that is the common thread that I see within people in our field is like all of us were curious. All of us started
Yeah,
young. We all had these little seedlings of like, that seems
mhm,
interesting, not shameful, not um
yeah,
not scary or anything like that. The majority of people in our field that I talk to, either on the
yeah,
show or just like in life, it's so much of this just comes from our own curiosity of like, this is something we want more information on.
definitely.
And there's not a lot of information. So, let's do it.
Yeah, I had a great group of, like, female friends in high school, and we were all sexually active, and we talked about it all the time. The conversation at our lunch tables, like, we were deeply explicit, like, we were not shy, and I feel like
Hmm.
that was such a gift. Like, I was talking very frankly about sex with other girls who were having sex when I was young. And so, yeah, the shame, like, just never got
Yeah,
me.
no, I agree. I
I
mean,
don't yeah.
I grew up in a town where it was again, it's a big town right outside of New York City, so like you got everything. We had Jews, we had Christians, we had Catholics,
Mhm,
atheists, Muslims, Hindus, like there was literally everybody there. So there was not
mhm.
really I didn't really feel purity culture from the perspective of like this was in my everyday. It was more of like, oh, I know that there are people that are quote unquote prudes, people who are slutty. Like we ran the gamut and we did all talk about sex. Like
Yeah,
sex was not something that I remember any of us shaming away from or shying away from. I went to camp, so also a
mhm,
good blend of different types of people and like we were always talking about sex. We were talking about hooking up, who was doing what was happening, what was it like, what was this like, what did you do with so and so, what was that, have you done this, have you done that? And I don't
mhm.
ever, I mean, of course, there was like, slut shaming, but it was just really like, oh, those are the slutty girls. Like, but no one was ever to my memory, I always thought they were cool as fuck. So I was like, oh yeah, the slutty girls, like, I want to be one.
Yeah.
They're hot. Are you kidding? Look at these bitches. Like, they're fucking hot. They're free. They're living their lives. Like,
Mhm.
everyone's good. So it's interesting when I look back at that, to your point of like, I talk to a lot of girlfriends, it was so normal for all of us to talk about blowjobs and getting
Yeah,
fingered and having sex. And I don't remember a
yes.
lot of talk about
Yeah,
anal because I don't think a lot of people were doing it because when you're not forced into it as a
no.
teenager, the way that a lot of people in purity culture are, you're using all the other avenues. And I felt
Mhm. Yes, it's like a it's not
100%.
first
There's a
on the
lot of
list
other
of
holes you could be
goals,
sticking
right?
things in and experimenting with. And something interesting now that I'm talking out loud about it was like it didn't I personally never felt any sort of pressure to do anything. Like, of course, there was like talk about, so and so did this. Like, there was always talking shit and like lies and the teenage stuff that happens. But thinking about it now, I don't think that there was a big sense of pressure to do something or not do something. And I think it was because it was normal for everyone to be talking about sex versus being so secretive and
Yeah.
shameful about it. So that's an interesting thing that I'm only thinking about for the first time right now.
Mhm. Yeah.
And so how did
Yeah.
you Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That makes a lot of
Yeah,
No,
I
I
never
was just like,
really
that makes
thought
a lot
about
of
it, but I'm like, yeah,
sense.
we were all talking about sex all the time. And it wasn't, purity culture. I'm
Mhm.
sure there were people who I grew up with that were around it and grew up in that, but it was not even remotely a prevalent thing in my high school or where I grew up or junior high or even
Right.
the camps that I went to. But I'm
Mhm.
curious how you got into purity culture and how, like, was this something that you really started with or did it develop over time?
It really developed over time because I've been a sex educator as my career for my whole career. And for me, that means right out of college, I started working. Well, I was a women's studies major in college. I specialized my academics in like
Mm,
female sexual health and sexuality. And my first job out of college was at an abortion clinic. And I was a counselor and
love that.
educator at an abortion clinic. And I graduated college in 2001. My 9/11 story is that I was working in an abortion clinic on the morning of September 11th. And it was wild because we started to kind of know what was happening. And I was counseling these folks to be like, hey, do you want to leave or do you want to stay and have your abortion? And some
Yeah.
people stayed and some people left. But I bring that up because right after that, there were a bunch of abortion clinics that got threats, and they got threats from like fundamentalist Christians.
Wow.
And we were one of them. So there was this organization called the Army of God, who were like a Christian fundy organization that were like anti
Mm,
abortion terrorists. And they sent fake anthrax powder to our clinic and to a bunch of other clinics. And so that was my work in abortion care was my first like close encounter with the kinds of Christians that
wow.
are purity culture. Like the violent fundamentalist, like we're gonna bomb your clinic. There used to be a website that was terrifying. It was like dripping in blood names. It was like, imagine a website from
Yeah. Probably
2001, so
stars
it's
in the
like real
background.
janky, but it had like names. Yeah, it was like names of abortion doctors and people that worked at clinics, like with fake blood, because it was supposed to
Yeah.
be a hit list. Like, these are the people that you should, these are the people on our hit list. And you know, my work in abortion care was brief. It was only like a year. And that was when I first was like, holy shit, keeping people from sex education is so harmful because all of the patients I saw were, some of them were people that were raised without any information about sex. Some of them were women that were deeply Christian and Catholic, and they would tell us, we don't believe in this, but we have to, like, I don't believe
Yeah.
in this, but I have to have this abortion. Um, and so I encountered a lot of that in that work, and just watching the hypocrisy of, these people that were like, we want to kill you for doing abortions because we believe in
So
life. Like
twisted.
that kind of shit. So yeah, so that was like, I was so young. I was like 22, 23 years old when I was doing that work. And then I moved to Philadelphia and I got a job in I worked in abortion care here in Philly for a while too. And then I got a job that I held for a long fucking time, like 17 years, where I worked it was for a children's hospital, but I would go into the juvenile detention center in Philly and do sex ed and intensive one-on-one sex ed and HIV prevention work with
Wow.
the kids in juvenile detention. And they were all kids that had really like difficult backgrounds. Some of them were parents, some of them had done sex work, some of them had been sex trafficked. Most of them had a history of sexual abuse and assault. And like it was my job to sort of educate them and support them and also provide them with social services to sort of stabilize their lives. So like I worked with kids that had HIV, that were trans, that were like just all manner of issues related to sexuality and gender. And when I was doing that work, I was doing it for so long that I realized like I would like to stop this and start my own sex education business. And I sort of landed in the purity culture niche because um, more people were coming out of evangelical Christianity and talking about it than ever before. So those people very often call
Yeah.
themselves ex-evangelicals or people that have deconstructed. And there's been a massive wave of them. And one of the big waves came with the 2016 election because these young people, not all young people, but they were like, wait a minute, my church is supporting Donald Trump who grabs them by the pussy. I learned that we were supposed to be, more conscientious about our sexuality, and you're supporting this like
Yeah.
disgusting rapist pedo. And so there was a mass exodus from evangelical Christianity with the
Wow.
2016 election. There was another mass exodus in 2020 with people um, confronting the racism in their churches with the way their churches talked about like George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. And it really just coincided with I'm leaving my full-time job. I'm wanting to be a sex educator for hire, but who am I doing this for? And I realized like the people that need sex education the most, other than the kids in detention, are adults who were denied sex education because they were wearing purity rings instead. And they now have this very loud voice. And I'm hearing feedback from people like, I was raised in purity culture and I had a purity ring and I never had a sexual experience. And now I'm 35 and I don't fucking know anything. And I feel really embarrassed and shy about it. And that was when I was like, I felt like it makes so much sense for me. Like, I was like, is my whole life been
Yeah.
leading to this moment where, yes, I wasn't raised in purity culture, but that is the benefit for me because I wouldn't have, 20 some years of sex ed experience and sexuality professional experience behind me to help people who
Well,
were
and you
raised in
also
purity
have that
culture.
different lens,
So
right? Like,
that's really
just as I was saying, like, I observed it from the outside, which gives you such a different
Mhm.
perspective. And you're not actually fighting your own belief
It
systems and
really
breaking through your
does.
own shame and breaking, like,
Yes.
rewiring your own system and your family and the people that you looked up
Mhm.
to growing up. Like, there's so many benefits to you being an
Yeah.
observer of the impact of these groups
Mhm.
versus having come from it. So I think I mean, it makes absolute sense.
Yeah. One of the biggest benefits is you probably experience this too. I hear things from people when they'll tell me like, "Oh yeah, I learned this in church," or "My family
Yeah.
told me this," and I'm shocked. And they'll be like, "Oh yeah, my pastor said that if I kiss someone, it's like cheating on my
What?
future husband." And I'll
Yeah.
be like,
Yeah.
I'll have that reaction, and that is a common
Yeah.
purity culture teaching. And I react the way you just did, and then they're like they feel so validated because I've been told like everyone else around me just thought all
Mhm.
of this was really normal, and my reaction to it tells them like it really validates that it was
Yeah, it
pretty
creates
fucked
a
up.
different layer of safety, which I think is really important because when you are not the person who's coming from that culture, you're separate from it. So they can say and share
Yeah.
whatever it is they need to share and say to you about their experience, and you're not going to be judging them, or they maybe they know this consciously, maybe it's subconscious, but you're not going to be judging them for questioning those things because you yourself are like, yeah,
Right.
no, that needs to be questioned because it's so far from the truth and reality, and
Yeah.
this is what's hurting you and hurting other people who are like you. And I'm here to be a
Mhm.
mirror for that, to say, you can share those things with me because I didn't grow up in it. So I'm just looking on the
Yeah.
outside like, hey, let's extract you from these belief
Yeah.
systems, because they're just so harmful. They're just so harmful. And the other thing,
Mhm.
I'm sure you've seen this in your work because this is what you do, but there is this, your whole life you're told, don't be sexual, don't look sexy, don't do this, don't touch anyone, don't touch yourself, don't feel things, don't.
Mhm.
The moment you put a ring on it, the moment you get married, now you're supposed to have sex. You're supposed to be desirable. You're supposed to pleasure your husband. You're supposed to
Mhm.
have babies. You're supposed to do all these things. And you're supposed to be, mostly this falls on women, but it does fall on men too, because they're supposed to be this sex god and she's supposed to be this vixen, when up until age 20, 21,
Yep.
22, 24, these young, still babies. Sorry, you're
Mhm.
24, you're a fucking baby. Until those ages, you're told absolutely not. Shut it down. Shut it down. That's wrong. You're going to hell. To unravel that, first of all, in one night is ridiculous, but it
Mhm.
takes decades to
Oh, yeah.
unravel something like that. So I'm curious what your experience is there and what you've seen, or just anything that you want to share in that context.
Oh, yeah. People use the
Yeah.
term like, "I'm supposed to flip a switch," you know, like, I'm supposed to flip a switch on my wedding night and then suddenly become not just comfortable with sex, but enthusiastic
Mm.
about it and maybe good at it. And, oh, it is never like that. I mean, everything from the stories I've heard range from my wedding night was traumatic. And sometimes that, that depends on the two people involved. If you are like a woman who was raised in purity culture and you have never been taught anything about your body, and you end up with a man who's like, well, now I've learned through the teachings of my church that my wife has to say yes to me, that she doesn't get a choice. I mean, we're talking everything from actual marital rape on wedding nights to just horrible, awkward fumbling in which both people feel really embarrassed and ashamed. And then they're like, we'll deal with this some other time. And that can take years. There are couples that they have such dysfunction around actually having sexual intercourse together that it
Mm.
becomes a thing they avoid. And it never sort of settles into an easy pattern for them. And it's awful. I mean, it's awful for all people involved, and some people just kind of stay that way. They're like, well, I'll do my
That's it.
duty, I'll do my wifely duty. And I've talked to women that I am shocked by the amount of sex they had in their marriage, in their like Christian purity marriage. They'll be like, yeah, we did it 3 times a week all year, no matter what, no matter if I was sick, no matter if I was pregnant. And I'm
That's a
just like, 3
lot.
times a week is a lot. 3
Specifically
times a
when
week
you
is
don't
a
want
lot.
it, when you're not
Um,
turned on 3 times a week,
yes.
would literally destroy my body. I would have so many, I mean, I have such a sensitive body that,
Oh,
like,
God.
I blink and I'll get a UTI. I mean, it's better now that I've changed my diet, but still, like, to have, and this is, I wanted to touch on consent in these contexts as well. And I think
Yeah.
you opened up the conversation so beautifully, because marital rape is a thing.
Mhm.
It's absolutely real. Just because you're married does
Yeah.
not mean consent is inherent. Consent is always required.
But there are
Yep.
preachers, everything you just said is, to
100%.
me, the law,
Yes.
right? Like the law of how we should live. There are preachers out there, including the pastor of Pete Hegseth, our Secretary of War, quote unquote. His pastor is a guy named Doug Wilson. That man believes that women shouldn't even vote. And he absolutely believes that we
So
don't
he's a
have the right to
rapist.
say no in
That's
marriage.
it. He's a
I watched
rapist.
Yes, I watched a clip of another pastor. I forget where this guy's a pastor at. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
He whatever, whoever he is, but he was literally saying, he was making fun of the you may kiss the bride, that part of the vows, because he was like, well, yeah, I can do anything I want to the bride now. Like, he literally speaks that from the
Yeah.
pulpit. So you get, there's also this ridiculous teaching emerged at some point in certain evangelical circles that men must have sex
What?
every 72
Go
hours.
fuck yourself. Literally, go to the bathroom, take care of yourself. If you need to come every 72 hours, it's not going to be with me. Go do that on your own. Thank you. What?
Right. And it's it's based on it's been traced back to James Dobson, which is the man who invented
Oh,
focus on the
yeah.
family. Horrible,
Yep.
horrible, abusive man. He passed away
Oh,
last
yeah.
year. Many people rejoiced because they had been
Yep.
so traumatized by his teachings. But it's believed that he was the one that said in one of his early marriage books from the 1970s that something about like how often men like produce sperm in their bodies means that they need to like relieve their sexual tension every 72 hours, and that's not also true, but it was twisted to be it's a wife's duty to do this, to have sex with her husband, every 3 days or so. And some people really take that to heart. And imagine the amount of like overriding your own body's
Big time.
sense of safety, overriding your own instincts, the amount of dissociation you would have to
Mm-hmm.
go into as a woman to endure
Yeah.
sex every 72 hours. But the shaming belief comes with this message that if you're not providing your husband with that regular sex, he's going to cheat and it will be your fault, or he's going to look at porn and stray from God, and that will be your fault too, because it was on you to make him
Which is
come on a
so
regular
harmful
basis.
and so damaging. And when we say rape culture, this is a part of what we mean because this is marital rape. If she's a full fuck yes and she's excited and like today's the day and she's really looking forward to it, like absolutely that's great. I would guarantee 70% of the time that's not the case, if not a much, much, much higher number than
Yeah.
that. So there's that aspect of things. But then we also need to look at the men and the impact on the men and the pressure that they feel also to do that 3
Yeah.
times a week and to have sex with their wife who doesn't want it also 3 times a week. So it's not just harm on the woman because, of
Yeah.
course, these are heteronormative marriages here. So it's not just the harm that's being done to
Mm-hmm.
the woman who's on the receiving end of this. There's also harm being done to the men who feel like they have no option. And if they don't do this, and if they don't make themselves get hard, if they don't make themselves have sex with their wives, if they don't make this thing happen, and it's on them to make it happen, not her. It's on her to just accept the truth and accept what's happening to her, but it's on him to make sure that it happens. But that's not how penises work, especially as you get older. It's just not how bodies work. And so now
Yes.
at some point, maybe in the beginning, he's, 20 years old and like all gung ho for this, fine. But at some point, that shifts.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point, he too is pushing past his own physical boundaries, his own mental boundaries, his own consent to
Yes.
make this happen, pushing past his wife's consent because he also knows that she doesn't want to be doing this, but both of them know we just have to do this. So now, in a lot of these contexts and a lot of these situations, we have 2 people who are both not consenting, who are doing it anyway for fear of God, just like how we started this conversation. What are we
Yes.
actually doing?
Yes. All of that. It's like when you are at the point where external rules set by men who you don't even fucking know, who wrote a book at one point, are dictating how and when you have sex, I feel like we've entirely
Absolutely.
lost the
And
plot. It is not supposed to be something we do on a schedule for someone
no,
else that's not
absolutely
even in our
not. And sex
marriage.
is not something that's ever done on a schedule. I'm very obviously anti duty sex, but I'm also very anti maintenance sex as
Mhm.
well. When it's like every Tuesday, we have sex. We're
Mhm.
going to set this time and we're going to have sex whether we want to
Mhm.
or not because responsive desire. Abso-fucking-lutely not. That is not how it works. I am incredibly
Yeah.
pro intimacy dates, which sex is not required for that.
Mhm.
We don't have to ever have sex. You can have intimacy dates every single Tuesday for the next 5 years and never have sex once during those intimacy dates and still have a deeply fulfilling, bonded relationship. If neither one of you want to be incorporating sexual activities,
Yes.
right? Everybody has to be that full fuck yes.
Mhm.
And anytime we're doing any sort of duty sex, maintenance sex, required sex, scheduled sex, anytime it is expected, we're already operating from a place of non consent as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was so well said. The scheduling, like it loses, I feel like it loses its purpose when it becomes,
Yes.
we must have sex on this date. Like you said, intimacy dates, that's
Yeah.
that's the thing to
And
aim
we
for.
touched on this a little bit, but I think in purity culture, we tend to talk a lot about the women's side of things. And I'm curious on what you might have to
Mhm.
say about men in purity culture and the negative impact on men.
Yes, I'm glad you asked because I have a fair number of male clients and they also really suffer. It is not the same as bearing the burden of purity the way
Yeah.
women bear the burden of purity, but they learn so much misinformation about sex and about how to be men and how to be masculine. I've heard guys say, like, I was taught that I was going to always want it. So the first time I didn't, they were like, "What's wrong with me that I don't wanna have sex tonight?" Or, "What's wrong with me if I'm not masturbating?" Because they were just taught that you are basically a sex demon that must be reined in and controlled. So women are taught to fear their bodies, like, "My body's gonna get me in trouble, men are gonna look at me and desire me and harm me, and I've gotta cover up and be modest." And then men are taught that their desires are constantly just insatiable, and that that is the natural sort of state of things for men, is like this insatiability, always trying to get it. And a lot of guys, like,
Yeah.
they really don't feel that way. And then some of them end up being really afraid of how to approach women because they have only learned this one specific way of relating to them, which is you're a man in Christianity, she's a woman in Christianity, you're supposed to, be the sexual the sexual leader. And there are guys that are like, is it, like, I've worked with men who don't even know how to like, to identify attraction to women, because when they were young they were taught to, there's this phrase, bounce your eyes. So if you see some like nice cleavage or you see a nice ass, you're supposed to like bounce your eyes away from it. And some guys get so good at turning off their own visual cues, their own desire, their own, the things that occur naturally to most of us. Like you see a hot
Mhm.
person, you think, oh, there's a hot person. A lot of men raised in purity culture turn that
Yeah.
off. I mean, women too, but I've worked with men that are like, how do I approach a woman without being creepy? Because they don't know that you can. Because so many people learn to associate desire with
Oh,
disrespect.
wow. That's powerful. That is powerful. And it's
Yeah.
another example of how growing up in purity culture is systematically shutting down your own internal signals, whether that is a signal for consent, a signal for danger, a signal for attraction. And I have to believe, as a holistic practitioner, that that is also going to impact other areas like maybe hunger, maybe danger in other situations, maybe,
Mhm.
I don't even know all the different ways, but when you are consistently teaching your signals, nope, we're not, yep, nope, we're
Yeah.
gonna, I see this signal and I'm gonna ignore it. And body, you're not right. And gut, you're not true. And whatever signal I'm
Yes.
receiving is incorrect.
Yes.
That is gonna show up everywhere. There's no way for us to just keep this in a one
Yes.
tiny little compartment. It's going to impact every area of your life.
It's That is so true, which is why, like, just learning sex education that you didn't have access to is a really important part of overcoming purity culture. But for other folks, there's a lot of work to do around learning to be
Mm-hmm.
back in your body, like somatic work, where you learn to like pay attention to your body's signals, whether that's hunger or arousal or being tired. Like there's so much of Christianity, at least, you know, if you're an evangelical or in a fundamentalist version of Christianity, where your body is, it's taught that like that's not important. It's your spirituality, it's your soul, it's your relationship with God. So you turn off
Yeah.
everything from the neck down. And of course, you're correct, that shows up not just in sex, but it shows up in people overworking, people not learning to rest, people having really fucked up relationships with food. Um, Even people that are like, yeah, I just
That's exactly
ignore
what I was thinking
health
about too.
conditions. Like I didn't
Yeah,
realize I was in
yeah. We
pain.
have
Yeah.
to, our bodies are always, always, always in conversation with us. And if you want to tie that back into spirituality, that is a part of spirituality. You are a spirit in this body. We have to honor the
Mhm.
body that we're in, and these tools that will say, Gus, whatever it is, you know, whatever it is that you believe in, whether it's science, God, universe, source, whatever, we have to honor what has been given to us. And if you really want to be a spiritual person, that includes
Mhm.
taking care of this physical body that you are in, because if you believe in God, then didn't God make this for you? If you believe in God, then isn't God the one that's making sure that these signals from your body are talking to you? I mean, we can flip that switch any way we want to,
Right.
but there is spirituality in this physical body that we all have to live in that we can't change. I mean, you could change some aspects of it, but we
Absolutely.
have the bodies that we have. Mm.
Mhm. Yeah. And so much of healing from purity culture is sort of like reconnecting the wires that
Yeah,
they severed
yeah.
for
I
you.
mean, we have to rewire our nervous systems, our belief systems, our family systems, our community systems.
Mhm.
It is an entire unraveling and rewiring, and I am so grateful that you are doing this work and other people like you are doing this work, cuz like I said, I mean, for anyone
Thank
that's been
you.
listening to the show since day 1, we can't even count on our fingers at this point, because I've done so many episodes, how much purity culture comes up, because so many people have been impacted by purity culture. It is an undeniable reality of growing up in the United States. In other countries as well, but more so here than anywhere else, because the way we have equated it into the government too. Like, get the fuck out of here.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole like purity culture. I feel like the one thing I want to emphasize before we wrap up is
Yeah.
that it's not a thing of the past. Like, yes, there was a purity movement in the 90s and early 2000s that involved rings and pledges and the Jonas brothers wearing purity rings, all that shit. Like, yes, there was a cultural moment where that was very big, but we currently have people in the government who want to drag us back to the fucking centuries prior in terms of how we relate to sexuality, how we relate to each other, men and women. You know, they're the same pastors that preach purity are preaching getting rid of
Yes.
divorce,
Yeah.
taking the vote away from women. Like these people are fucking scary. The Christian nationalists, their official
Yeah.
sexual ethic is purity culture. Purity
They're
culture
one and
and
the same.
fascism
They're together
are
like this.
very
Like,
good friends.
yeah. 100%.
Yep.
And this is a great opportunity to remind everyone to make sure that you are registered to vote. This is going to come out in May. So, this is going to be plenty of time for you to register to vote wherever you are before the preliminary elections in November, because I do believe we have them. I mean, there's always elections going on.
Mhm.
So, vote locally, vote nationally, vote federally,
Yeah.
like do all of the things, because the people who are wanting to continue, because they already are in power, they already have control of our government, they are only going to make things worse. And whether you believe in some of these things or not, it is so important that we stop this combining of Christianity and our government, because I'm not a Christian and I don't believe in any of that shit.
Yes.
And if you're watching this show, you probably
Mm-mm.
don't either. So just a good reminder, make sure you're registered. If you are voting in the primaries, not preliminaries, I just looked up all sorts of, I was just on the Olympics. Yeah, I know. I was like, that's not the right word. I just,
like, yep.
the Olympics is coming to LA and we have like these little windows to buy tickets. So I was just buying a whole bunch of tickets. So preliminary is in my head. But the primary elections, something that you may not know is that if you're independent, if you are not tied to the Democrats or the Republicans during the primaries, then your vote for certain categories does not count. So it is so important, even if you just change it for the primaries, to buy into the two-party system, because right now we have a two-party system and it is more dangerous to try to divert from that than it is to just lean in and do what you can with what we've got. That is the era that we're in. That is how Trump won in 2016. It's how he won again in 2020. Now is not the fucking time. So choose a fucking lane and make sure that you are putting all of our power behind the lane that is going to prioritize consent, separation of church and state, and making sure that we all have the right to vote, that we have bodily autonomy, and that we can actually take care of each other and not fall into this Christian fundamentalist. Because the more you lean into this, like, I don't want to be one of those parties, that is a vote for Christian fundamentalists. So I'm going to get off my soapbox right now, but that had
100%.
to be said.
Yes. You can't talk about purity culture in America without acknowledging like what is happening. And you can't talk about sex without
talking about the people that are like, I'm not political. Baby, your sex is. I don't care what your gender is. I don't care what your sexuality is. Sex is political. Full stop. So where can people find you? Hard pivot. Because you got a great book that people need to get.
Where can people find you? Yes, my website is called purityculturedropout.com. Pretty easy to remember. I am active on Instagram and Threads mostly, and my name on social media is Erica Smith Educates. Erica spelled with a C. Those are the places to find me. And in addition to the Purity Culture Recovery Guide that just came out, I'm also about to start a support group for men. I run several different support groups for Purity Culture Recovery, and they're usually like, there's a subgroup for queer people, a subgroup for divorced people, and I am going to start reaching out and connecting men with each other to have these conversations. So, find me.
I love that so much. There are not enough resources for men. A lot of women want to attack men and say, they're not doing the work. They're not this, they're not that. It is so much harder for them to actually get to resources besides getting past their own shame, guilt, ego, all of that. And the cultural context of like, men don't do these things that we are all trying to rewrite, right? There are just literally not a lot of resources for men. There are so many resources for women and queer people, but there are not that many resources for cis straight men. So I love that you are creating that space. It is so necessary. So please go follow Erica. You know, all of her stuff is below. You can find me at Birds and Bees Don't Fuck without the U everywhere, because censorship is real. And if you can spell my name, good for you. That's my primary Instagram account. But Erica, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been such a good conversation, as I knew it was going to be. I've been so excited to talk to you. And thank you all for coming. I hope you come again and again and again and again. See you next week.